In today's video, we continue on with our NHL season preview series as we work our way through teams in the Atlantic Division. We're now down to the final two teams, which are both from the state of Florida. Today, we look at the two-time Stanley Cup champion, Florida Panthers. What are the odds of a three-peat? We'll take a look at how this team has changed going into the 25-26 season, discuss expectations and a projected lineup coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we continue on with our NHL season preview series. Now, if you're new to this series, we've been covering so far to begin all the teams in the Atlantic Division. We've covered the first six. Now we have two teams remaining. Florida and then Tampa will be the next team. Then we'll move on to a new division, likely one of the ones in the Western Conference coming up next. So we're going to recap what happened last year, take a look at some key team and individual statistics, analyze the cap space, how the team has changed by looking at additions and subtractions, looking at any contract extensions, trades, rookies that could have an impact, projected lineup, and then questions and expectations facing the team. So let's start by recapping last year, which ultimately was another very successful year for the Florida Panthers. We know they won the Stanley Cup, but was the regular season quite as good as we've seen before? Not really. They were 1 point away from being a wild card team, but this team turned it on at the right time and were still a very, very tough out in the playoffs, and they haven't lost a playoff series in a couple of years now. So clearly, they were at their best at the right time for sure. But they finished with a record of 47, 31-4, 98 points, third place in the Atlantic. Like I said, nothing to be upset about. Good season. But, for a back-to-back Stanley Cup champion, it was a tight going in the regular season. Like I said, Ottawa, who was the wildcard one team, was only 1 point behind them. It could have drastically changed the matchups for the first round of the playoffs and could have altered how things went for sure. But they managed to stay in that top three, get a divisional matchup with Tampa, who they beat in pretty, I wouldn't say easy fashion, but, 5-game series. Then, of course, the Leafs are the round two opponent. They came the closest to beating the Panthers, 4-3. Toronto had complete command and control of that series early, too. And then Florida, again, had to have a comeback. And look at the first year when they won the Cup. They almost were out in round one against the Bruins. You thought they were dead, and then they're like, nope, we're not. And they came back, and they won, and they went all the way. And they did the same thing against Toronto. Then they went on and beat Carolina, and of course faced the Edmonton Oilers for the second consecutive year in the Stanley Cup final. This time they won in 6 games. Last year they won in 7 games, 1-goal game. This year I think it's fair to say that they beat the Oilers just a little bit easier. It still was a tough series, but the first round was definitely closer for sure. They scored 246 goals last year, 15th best in the league, so they were only average in the regular season. Goals against was still top of the league though, or one of the top ones, 7th best, 223. So clearly good goaltending, pretty good defense, even when teams were, when their players weren't scoring as much. They found ways to win. So they've made the playoffs now for 5 consecutive years, won the last 2 Stanley Cups. They've kind of turned themselves into being, pretty close to being a dynasty. And in my opinion, I think you have to win 3 championships to be considered a dynasty, but really they've been to 3 consecutive Stanley Cup finals. They've played a lot of hockey in the last 3 years for sure, which is why I think, getting into regular season last year, not that they didn't care. They sure do. They want to win all the time, but they had a decent amount of injuries throughout the year. They had players missing, and I think they knew that once they were pretty comfortable that they were trending towards getting back into playoffs, which really was probably, wasn't really all, not like they were really ever out of it per se. I think once they knew that, they're like, okay, we'll be okay for playoffs. I think they have that much confidence in themselves. They were led by Sam Reinhart, 81 points. Now, Reinhart a couple of years ago was a 60-goal guy, right? Did Reinhart put up 50, 60 goals again? No, he didn't. But he's still the leading scorer. Barkov had 71 points. Tkachuk had 57, and he only played 52 games. Of course, he went into 4 nations for Team USA. Him and his brother Brady went on, quite an epic, battle against Team Canada in the beginning. They both ended up getting hurt. Tkachuk's injuries, Matthew, was a lot more serious. missed the rest of the regular season, but miraculously came back for the playoffs, of course. Carter Verhaeghe, 53 points, Sam Bennett, 51. So, yeah, they went through their fair share of adversity in the regular season, but they were still a good team. They still got in the playoffs. Like I said, they were at their best when it mattered most. The GM, Bill Zito, continued to make crazy good deadline moves, bringing in Brad Marchand. Like, they pick up the Bruins captain who comes in, and then, of course, Seth Jones before him, too. Like, pretty crazy how they went about their business and got these big moves done, and a lot of that was due to the LTIR availability as well, and, of course, Ekblad's suspension and Ekblad's contract not counting against the cap while suspended didn't hurt matters either. Going into the season, they have $4.5 million above the salary cap, but as we know, Matthew Tkachuk is not going to be starting the season on time because of his injuries in the playoffs. Of course, he waited to have surgery, and a lot of people wonder why he waited. It's because he had a big summer coming up. He was planning to get married. They had their wedding all planned, and of course, after winning the cup, he wanted to enjoy his day with the cup and probably not be, in a hospital bed. So they waited until he got through his. He had his day with the cup right after his wedding, and then he went under the knife not long after that. So he'll be out until about January. And to be honest, he was probably never going to start the season on time anyway. Could he have made it back a few weeks sooner? Maybe, but really, is it really worth it for him when those are pretty important things in his life to be able to enjoy without having surgery first? I'm sure he was in some pain and discomfort, anyway. So, yeah, I know some people question the decision, but I really don't think it's a big deal. It's not like it's a case of waiting to have surgery like the day before the season starts, missing the whole year for LTIR purposes. And with the rule changes, teams aren't going to be able to manipulate that anymore. So, obviously, it's not really going to play a role in the upcoming year anyway. But Matthew Tkachuk will be out until the new year by the looks of things. You never know, maybe he comes back sooner, but January is what we're targeting. He'll likely be able to play a handful of games, few weeks before the Olympics is what everything is kind of projected at right now. Now, looking at how this team has changed in the offseason, it's really not changed a whole lot. They've got a bunch of players coming in on potential PTOs. They got a whole whack of guys who can play in the bottom six. They didn't lose anything significant really off this roster, leaving the team a few players that had some okay roles, like Nico Sturm. Nate Schmidt was a nice reclamation project for the Panthers last year. He cashed out, went to Utah, which, the Panthers were never going to be able to give him that kind of money. Kaapo Kähkönen, Vitek Vanacek, and Jacob Megna. So, they have a new backup goalie now, but otherwise, really these guys were very much, not having, besides Schmidt, weren't regulars anyway. Additions this year. They brought in Jeff Petrie on the back end, so he'll basically be the new Nate Schmidt. At least they hope that he can kind of rejuvenate his career after some not so good seasons in Detroit. Petrie's really, to be honest, to be fair with Jeff Petrie, he hasn't really been good in a while. His last, even towards the end of his time in Montreal, things were changing, but it seems like everybody that goes to Florida, Vegas, it seems to rejuvenate them, and they find their games. So, look, a lot of people thought Seth Jones was terrible too, and then he goes to Florida, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, actually, he's pretty good. Sometimes the team you're playing on, the environment, your teammates, it all makes a difference. So we'll see what happens with Jeff Petrie. He's new to the team this year. Luke Kunin comes in on a one-year deal. Of course, he'll be fighting for a role in the bottom six. Like I said, they've got a lot of guys who can play there. Danil Tarasov, who was formerly of the Blue Jackets, comes in as a backup goalie. Has had some rough stretches with the Blue Jackets, so we'll see where that goes. They also signed Brandon Bussi, who's going to be on a 2-way deal, so he'll likely be with one of their, he'll be one of their, probably their number 3 option maybe with goalies. We'll have to wait and see how the goalie depth looks. Jack Stanika comes in, Nolan Foote as well. They're probably players that are going to most likely play in the minors and be call-up options. Of course, they're not really additions, but this team was creative, spent a lot of money and a lot of creativity getting everybody to come back, basically, or most players, including Brad Marchand, who signs a ridiculously long-term contract for a man of his age, 6-year deal for a 37-year-old. Aaron Ekblad gets a long-term deal to stay when everybody thought he was gone. Sam Bennett gets an 8x8 to stay, and I don't think a lot of people thought he was gone, but you certainly had to question it for sure, because he could have probably get paid more money elsewhere. Thomas Nosek comes back as well. He was there last year and comes back on a 1-year deal. And they got a bunch of guys on PTOs as well. They got Noah Gregor and Tyler Mott, who are both traditionally bottom 6, fourth line guys on PTOs, and veteran defenseman Ben Harper also on a PTO. So the PTOs they have don't really make a lot of sense to me, because like, if you look at their bottom 6, like their third line already is going to consist of guys like Lundell and Marchand, Lusterinen, like pretty good players. And then on the fourth line, you've already got players that are signed like Nosek and Jesper Boqvist and Luke Kunin, who they brought in. They got AJ Greer there who was there last year and played a good role in the playoffs. Jonah Gadjevich, who had a good role in the playoffs. It's like they already got like 5 guys to play in the fourth line. And so I'm not really sure where Gregor or Mott fit in. Maybe there's more injuries we don't know about. I'm not sure. But yeah, some names there that I guess we'll see how they do, but I don't expect them to necessarily get signed. I mean, we'll have to wait and see where things play out. I mean, as far as looking at rookies on this team, I don't see any rookies being in the opening night lineup, and I don't really see any rookies really coming up to have an impact either. I mean, Mackie Samoskevich is the closest thing to it. He's a younger player. Hopefully we'll have a bigger role this year. I suspect he'll be a guy to watch, especially with the Tkachuk injury in the first half of the season. I suspect he'll be one of those guys that will be able to elevate and get more of a role and see if he can't take advantage of it. As far as trade bait goes, there's really, again, no clear, obvious players that you can say they're most likely going to get moved. But when Tkachuk does come back, like I said, they're $4.5 million over the cap. They can get through the first part of the season because he's going to be on long-term injury reserve. But with the rule changes, like that's not gonna be a season-long thing. Now, by the time Tkachuk comes back, you never know. Maybe another player is hurt, right? And they might be able to buy themselves even more time. But at this rate, they're going to need to make a move by the time Tkachuk's healthy, assuming that everybody else is too. The name that most people feel is the most obvious is Evan Rodriguez. I suspect he's a player the Panthers don't really want to move. But when you look at the roster and you're like, okay, if we have to move a player to get cap compliant, and you look at like the amount of money everybody makes and their roles, you know, they're not going to move Barkov. They're not going to move Reinhardt. They're not going to move Verhaeghe. They're not going to move Bennett. They're not going to move Brad Marchand, Lundell, Samoskevich. Like, you know, Rodriguez is a utility guy. You can play him on pretty well anywhere in your top 9, and he'll probably be okay. You can put him on the wing. He can even play center a bit. So like there's options with him, which is also gives him value. So I think he could get good value. Maybe get a good draft pick or something, or a good prospect for him. But he makes the most sense. But like I said, when Tkachuk's ready to come back, maybe their health situation is different. They might be able to buy more time. And you just don't know where things are going to be at. As far as contract extensions go, again, a lot of these guys are signed long-term. You're looking at like Barkov, Reinhardt, Tkachuk, Verhaeghe, Bennett, and, you know, Lundell's got some term. Marchand just re-upped. Forsling, Ekblad, Jones, like Bobrovsky's down. Now, Sergei Bobrovsky's going to be interesting. He's going to be a name to watch as his contract comes to a close. Nico Mikkola, another defenseman who I know they are fond of back there, has done well. So it's just those are the main guys really you could kind of look to maybe do that. Now, as far as a projected lineup going into the season, we're going to suspect the goaltending tandem, which is pretty clear. Sergei Bobrovsky and Danil Tarasov will be your 1-2. I do wonder, overall, I think that's a weaker tandem. Like I said, Tarasov's numbers in Columbus, and I've seen him play a handful of times last year, and it wasn't good. Like, it wasn't good at all. So how much can they trust him to play? I think at this stage of Bobrovsky's career, like, he's played really well the past few years. That contract was looking horrible when he first signed in Florida. The first couple of years, you're like, oh my God, like, this is a terrible, terrible deal for the team now. Like, he's not the same Bobrovsky, but then he found it again, and they've been on a crazy run for 3 years. But at his age, do you really want him playing 65, 70 games? You probably don't. But at this rate, you don't really probably trust Tarasov to play a whole lot more than that, right? So I'm not really sure how they go about that. But that's going to be if there's any part of their, team that might be weakened a bit, I do think the backup goaltending spot is a little bit suspect at this point. Their decor is still very solid. Of course, you're likely going to have a top pair of Forsling and Ekblad. You get Mikula and Jones. That'll make up your top four. Kulikov, who's still got a few years left, likely slots in as your third pair left side, and I suspect Petrie likely takes the right side third pair job as the number 6 defenseman. Belinskas probably is your number 7 guy, and that's probably how your decor is going to look to start the year. Ben Harper maybe gets I'm not sure if he gets signed or not, but if he is, he's probably going to be like the number 8 on the depth chart. In the forward group, without Tkachuk, because keep in mind, Tkachuk will not be there, I suspect you're probably going to have a top line of Barkov, Reinhart, and Verhaeghe. Second line is probably going to be Bennett. It would normally be Tkachuk, but I suspect you'll probably put Samoskevich there and let him have a chance to really excel in that scoring type of role with some good players, and probably play Rodriguez on the second line as well. So, you could move guys around, but those are they're definitely going to be your top 6 guys for sure. But I suspect Barkov, Reinhart, and then Bennett, Samoskevich, and maybe Verhaeghe and Rodriguez maybe get switched on occasion. But those would be your top 6 forwards. Your third line is going to be Lundell, Lusterinen, and Marchand. There's no reason for Maurice to change that. They were terrific after Marchand came over. They became a line. They were just really good. So I suspect we'll see that. The same on the fourth line. Like I said, they've already got about 5 guys who can play on that line, not to mention Gregor and Mott on PTOs, but we've seen a combination in the number of the combinations changed a bit throughout the playoffs for Maurice without Kunin, because Kunin's there now but wasn't there last year. Between Nosek, Boqvist, Greer, and Gadjevich, 3 of those 4 guys were always in there. And then Nico Sturm was in there on occasion too. So you had the same thing. You had about 5 guys, and then usually they would sometimes change it up. Like Greer and Gadjevich are the ones that went in and ended up staying in towards winning the cup with Nosek. So, is that fourth line going to be Nosek with Greer and Gadjevich, or is Boqvist and Kunin going to be more regular with Greer and Gadjevich maybe subbing in? We're not sure how that's going to work. So I don't see really why they would have a need to sign a Gregor or a Mott unless they feel there's an upgrade and they can move somebody else. But considering what those guys did for them in the playoffs, I just don't think that's really necessary. So I'm not really sure what they're doing with those PTOs, but it doesn't hurt to have them there. There's no risk. If they look really good, maybe you figure something out and go from there. But that's your projected lineup for the Panthers going into the year. As far as the top questions and expectations here, for one is, how is the Tkachuk injury going to impact this team? Like I said last year, the regular season was good, but one last point, and they're a wild card team. So I still think they'd be comfortable going into the playoffs as a wildcard team, and I don't think anybody would want to play them. So I don't really think that's a bad thing. If they were to slip a little bit in the regular season, they would be fine with it. I think they have that much confidence, and they should, after back-to-back cups, that it really shouldn't matter where they finish. But at the end of the day, the Tkachuk injury is going to be a big factor. It's going to pick a big hole. So obviously, how much can Samoskevich and guys like him and Rodriguez, and to some degree Marchand as well, kind of pick up that slack and, see if they're the goaltending is a big question for me. 3 straight years in the final. It's a lot of hockey. Is this team going to get tired? Are they running out of steam? At what point is that going to happen? Because that happens to the best of them. So, makes you wonder, could they have a slow start to the season between, the 3rd straight cup, right? Or cup final appearance. So that means that's the 3rd straight short summer. It's a lot of hockey. They have no Tkachuk. They have a weaker backup goalie. Could we see the Panthers have a slow start to the year? The cards are lining up for it. But like I said, really, all that's going to matter to Florida is that they're in some kind of playoff spot and that they're healthy for the playoffs, and then they're going to have all the confidence in the world, and nobody's going to want to play them. So it's not really going to matter, but it'd be interesting to see, can they three-peat and really be a true dynasty here, because that's going to be their objective for the coming season. I think it's possible. I'm not going to rule it out. I've learned in the last 3 years you can't really bet against this team, because everything you have them written off, they come back. So yeah, it's going to be more challenging than it ever has been. It continues to get harder and harder and harder. Like I said, look at the regular season last year. Like, look at the individual stats. Those are not really what you'd expect on a high-flying cup contending team, but it worked for them. So imagine if these guys were having their best regular seasons or, whatnot. Like, so it's hard to say, but I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest. I could put the Florida Panthers anywhere from first place in the Atlantic to like 4th or 5th, and none of it would shock me. I would be shocked, though, if they don't make the playoffs. That's the only thing I'll say. They will be a playoff team, but where they're going to finish, it's a little bit harder to peg with the changes and the injuries, but we'll have to wait and see where things go. Let me know what you think. Do you think the Florida Panthers are going to have a shot at three-peating? If not, why? What do you think's holding them back? Who could maybe knock them off? Obviously, the Leafs have been a team that's come the closest the past couple of years, but now they look different as well. So I honestly wonder if this Atlantic division might just be a little bit more wide open than some might think going into the season. And could we see some different teams at the top, or top 3 or 4 spots? Wouldn't be shocking in the least. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll discuss in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.